best protection against the coronavirus, we must wear and use our masks or cloth face coverings correctly. All persons over age 2 and who can remove their masks themselves should wear one. Before putting on your mask, clean your hands. Your nose and mouth should be covered with no gaps between the mask and your face. Do not touch the mask when wearing it. If you do, clean your hands immediately. Replace your mask when it's damp. Discard disposable masks immediately after use, or wash reusable masks frequently. When removing your mask, do not touch the front. Remove your mask from behind, discard, and immediately wash your hands. Let's protect each other from COVID-19 and wear our masks.
Healthy people and healthy communities.
Oh man, no lights. Yo, it's a good thing I have this emergency kit. Got a flashlight.
Yeah.
Radio.
Yeah.
Water.
Yeah, whatever, man.
Non-perishable goods. A bucket, rope.
Whatever.
Sure, I even got batteries for the kids' games. Yo, I'm glad I planned ahead. How about you?
Yeah, man. I can stay here.
This message is brought to you by the Department of Health.
Good evening, Bermuda. I am joined today by the Ministers of Health and the Minister of Education, who will each give a statement. The Minister of National Security is also on hand to answer any questions which may come from members of the media. Before the Minister of Health gives her update, I would like to detail the changes to the configurations of the Cabinet of Bermuda. This morning, a new minister of the government was sworn in and welcomed to Cabinet. The Honorable Jason P. Hayward, Minister of Labor. Under his portfolio will be the Departments of Labor, Workforce Development, Financial Assistance, and aspects of the Department of Immigration. There were additional department and administrative changes that were made today. And in keeping with my promise, with the statement that I made, which was sent out at Government House earlier today, I will detail those changes now. However, these changes will position the government to respond swiftly to the changing local and global environment. First, under the office of the Premier, the Bermuda Casino Gaming Commission will be added from the Ministry of Finance. The Parliamentary Registrar and the Policy and Strategy section will move from the Office of the Premier to the Minister for the Cabinet Office. The Deputy Premier will remain the Minister of Home Affairs, and added to his portfolio are land valuation and land title registry, which have come from the Ministry of Public Works. Moving to other ministries will be municipalities, which will go to Public Works, intellectual property, which will go to the Minister for the Cabinet Office, and charities and parish councils, which will go to the Minister for Community Affairs and Sport. The Attorney General will remain as Minister of Legal Affairs, with social services being added to her portfolio. Minister Dickinson will remain as the Minister of Finance, with the Bermuda Casino Gaming Commission moving from that ministry to the Office of the Premier. Colonel Birch will remain Minister of Public Works, and as mentioned earlier, municipalities will be added to his portfolio, and land valuation and land title registry, which were formerly in the Ministry of Public Works, will move to the Ministry of Home Affairs. Minister Wilson will remain Minister of Health, as she's here today. Financial assistance will move to the Minister of Labor, which will allow health to continue to focus on the continued management of this pandemic. Minister Keynes will remain Minister of National Security. Most immigration functions will move to Labor, while the aspect of land licensing will move to the Minister for the Cabinet Office. Minister Keynes will retain border control functions under immigration to amalgamate them into customs to create a border force. Minister Fogo will serve as Minister of Community Affairs and Sports. Added to her portfolio are parish councils and charities, which were previously in home affairs. Moving to other ministries will be social services to legal affairs and labor and workforce development to the new labor ministry. Minister Ferbert will continue to serve as minister for the Cabinet Office. Added to this ministry are land licensing, intellectual property, parliamentary registrar, and the policy and strategy section. Minister Urbane will continue as Minister of Education, and Minister De Silva will continue as Minister of Tourism and Transport, and there were no changes to those respective ministerial portfolios. Jamal Simmons will become Junior Minister with responsibility for communications. In spite of the fact that Jamal Simmons leaves the Cabinet today, he has accepted my invitation to remain as a Junior Minister to continue assisting me through the office of the Premier in the valuable role of communications. Over the past few months, Minister Simmons has led a communications effort related to the pandemic, which has rivaled larger countries' attempts at communications with their populations. He and his team at Communications have done a stellar job over the past few months. I sincerely thank Minister Simmons for making the sacrifice and continuing on as a junior minister to ensure that the size of the cabinet is not expanded in this era of tight budgets. His willingness to serve epitomizes the spirit that is required of all of us during this time. I appreciate his dedication to serve the people of Bermuda, and I thank him for his efforts and his continued efforts. The reconfiguration of the cabinet is essential as we transition from the management of a health crisis to the required focus on our economy. With the creation of this new Ministry of Labor, I have determined to unite the areas of government that promote the training and employment of Bermudians with a unit that can serve to protect their interests when they seek employment for which they are qualified. We must put our people back to work now and prepare those displaced by the pandemic to assume jobs that will be created as we recover. The Constitution gives the Premier and the Premier alone the responsibility to decide the configuration of the cabinet. After reflection, I came to the conclusion that this was the best configuration for our island at this time. It is my hope that all Bermudians would lend their support to our cabinet as we continue the important work of rebuilding our economy. With that, I will now invite the Minister of Health to give an update on the latest test results. Minister?
Thank you, Premier. Good afternoon. Today, there were 39 test results received by the Ministry of Health, and none were positive for COVID-19. Bermuda continues to have 141 total confirmed positive cases, and their status is as follows. There are now 19 active cases, of which 12 persons are under active public health monitoring, and 7 persons are hospitalized, and none are in critical care. A total of 113 persons have now fully recovered, and the deceased total remains at 9. The average age of all confirmed positive cases is 61, and the age range of all of our positive cases is from 18 to 101 years. The average age of persons hospitalized is 79, and their ranges of age are between the ages of 66 and 91 years age. The average age of all deceased cases is 74, and the age range is 57 to 91. In terms of the race breakdown, 57% of all cases are Black, 41% are white, and 2 are other or unknown. The source of all local cases is as follows. 41 are imported, 84 are local transmission with known contact, 11 are local transmission with an unknown contact, and 5 are under investigation. Bermuda's country status remains a local transmission cluster of cases. The 7-day average of our real-time reproduction number is 0.39, putting us in a very good place, a great place, in fact, insofar as our control of coronavirus. As many people are aware, there is an air bridge arriving tomorrow from Toronto, repatriating Bermudians and residents who need to return home. I would like to remind the public that all arriving travelers have to quarantine at home for 14 days, and during this period, they cannot interact with others or receive any household visitors. We have very clear guidance on the website at coronavirus.gov.bm under the heading Guidance, which includes what a quarantined person can and cannot do and what other household members must do. Please help protect our most vulnerable by responsibly keeping away from quarantined persons for everyone's safety. Connect with your loved ones by phone and the various video and social media alternatives until they have completed their quarantine and have a negative result following the results of their 14-day quarantine. On the matter of protecting our most vulnerable, I want to pause again and remind the public of the continued need to shield persons who are most at risk for COVID complications and complications which can lead to death. Coronavirus can make anyone ill, but some persons are extremely vulnerable and are at a higher risk and need to be take extra steps to becoming ill, and this is called shielding. Shielding is a measure to protect clinically extremely vulnerable people from coming into contact with coronavirus by minimizing all interactions between them and others, especially individuals not living in their own household. However, households living with a person at higher risk from infection will have to take extra steps to support that individual. Household members do not all need to start shielding themselves, but they should do what they can to support the person who is being shielded and to carefully follow guidance on avoiding high risk settings and practice physical distancing. While at home, persons who are shielding should do the following. One, minimize the time other people living with you spend in shared spaces such as the kitchen, bathrooms, and sitting areas, and keep the shared spaces, well ventilated. Keep 6 feet away from people who you live with, and encourage them to sleep in a different bed if possible. If you can, use a separate bathroom for the rest of the household. Use separate towels from other persons in the household, both for drying yourself as well as bathing and showering, as well as for hand hygiene purposes. If you share a toilet and bathroom with others, it's important that they are cleaned every time after use, for example, wiping surfaces that you come in contact with, and consider drawing up a rota for bathing with you using the facility first, you meaning the shielded person. If you share a kitchen with others, avoid using it while they are present. And if you can, take your meals back to your room to eat. If you have one, use a dishwasher to clean and dry used crockery and cutlery. And if this is not possible, wash them using your usual washing up liquid and water and dry them thoroughly. If you are using your own utensils, remember to use separate tea towels for drying these. Everyone in your household should regularly wash their hands with soap and water for 20 seconds, avoiding touching their face, and clean frequently touched surfaces. You and the rest of your family or household should try to follow this advice as much as possible and as you are able. And I encourage everyone to go to coronavirus.gov.bm and look at the extensive resource tools that have been created to guide us through these often confusing times. And finally, as always, Bermuda, please continue to practice your physical distancing, minimize your social interactions, and of course, wear a mask. And no, a face shield should not replace a mask. I've actually been asked that question several times this week. A face shield will only reduce the droplet transmissions, but will not work if the virus is in the air. If you are going to be in close contact with people outside of your household, please wear a mask. Masks are critical for reducing coronavirus transmission by as much as 80%. They also act as a catch-all for the wearer, who then protects others from any illnesses that they may have. The message of mask wearing and physical distance is vitally important because these actions are key to our success. As a country, we will not contain COVID-19 or progress to phase 3 or 4 without the public fully embracing these actions. However, the reminder is essentially important today as we anticipate peaceful demonstrations over the weekend. Wearing a mask and physically distancing are especially important in crowded spaces. Mass gatherings such as this can lead to a surge in cases of COVID-19 if the necessary precautions that we've just spoken about are not taken. They can become super spreader events. So I implore all who intend to participate to wear your face mask and do your best to try to keep at least 6 feet apart from others and certainly no less than 3 feet. This is an opportune moment to remind the public again of our new reopening scorecard, which will be updated today and can be viewed on the website. You will see that the preventive measures is the first category of the indicators that we are measuring. And this is because they are the most important items that will enable us to move successfully through the phases. And for the whole of Bermuda is needed to participate in these. For this reason, I encourage the public to again sign up for the Health IQ and update their status regularly. Your participation and reports on Health IQ informs Bermuda's performance. The better we do on mask wearing, physical distance, and the adoption of technology, the better we will fare. Since Monday, we have gone through 5,000 participants to just over 6,000. So that is very well done, Bermuda, and I encourage everyone to sign up for the Health IQ because our target is 10,000 as a minimum. Your data is kept confidential as well, and it cannot be reviewed by anyone. A few people have asked if we can provide the COVID results by parish. While this cannot be done because with such small number of people, it could easily become identifiable. However, the Health IQ does provide a better alternative. The app reports aggregate data and provides a heat map of potential cases showing which postal codes have more reports. For persons looking to see where there are the most potential cases, Health IQ provides this solution. So visit the healthiq.bm to download the app and to help Bermuda get through the next phases of our reopening. Thank you, and stay safe.
Thank you very much, Minister of Health. The message of which you shared with masks is something I think which is particularly important because I happen to believe that because of the high prevalence of mask wearing and the requirement for masks being worn inside is possibly the reason why we've been able to see our transmission numbers be so low. And I think it's very important that that continue. It's very unfortunate that I see images being shared on social media of old advice from whether it be prior to persons recognizing that wearing of masks can certainly help to contain the spread of the coronavirus. And I just want to remind persons that that is old advice. It is advice that we had in March, but given that there's new information that has come to light, it is absolutely essential that when you are in interactions with persons, especially if you are indoors, that you continue to wear a mask, as it is vital to make sure that we can continue to progress as a country. I now invite the Minister of Education to give an update on Bermuda's schools and what parents can expect in the coming weeks and months. Minister.
Thank you, Premier. As previously shared, all schools, both public and private, were scheduled to open during Phase 3. However, as we are so close to the end of the school year, I have decided that public schools will not reopen this academic year for our students. I have further decided that the school term will end early for public school students to allow for additional school staff training prior to the reopening in September 2020. Therefore, the last day for school for all public school students is Friday, June 19th, 2020, instead of Monday, June 29th, 2020. Students will continue with the remote learning program, which commenced on March 23rd. This program includes online learning with school staff and/or the provision of learning packets to students. Continuing with this remote learning program until June 19th will enable our students to maximize learning days during the month of June. All primary, middle, and senior schools will hold their end-of-year school activities and school leaving ceremonies during the month of June as we bring closure to the 2019-2020 school year for students. We know that this time of the year is usually a special time for our students who are transitioning from pre to primary or to big school, as we say to our younger ones, a transitioning from primary to middle, from middle to senior, and from senior to college or university, or to enter into the work world. During these transitions, There are always celebratory activities that recognize what our children have achieved and how they have progressed through the year. Despite the limitations that COVID-19 presents to us, in that schools will not be having their usual graduation ceremonies, I'm pleased to share that our school leaders are being very creative in organizing graduation activities to recognize our graduating students at the different school levels. Information about the celebration activities will be communicated directly to our parents. All graduation activities will follow safety and health protocols as stipulated by the Department of Health and the Ministry of National Security. Also, the last day of the school term for school staff will remain on Tuesday, June 30th, 2020. School staff will continue to provide online learning experiences and learning packets for students up to June 19th, the last day of school for students. And from June 22nd to June 30th, principals and school staff will complete end-of-year activities. They will also participate in training workshops and carry out essential tasks in preparation for schools reopening in September for the 2020-21 academic school year. Senior schools and summer school. Both senior schools will continue the remote learning programs until students have completed their courses and coursework for the academic year. Once students are dismissed for summer vacation, senior school staff will spend the remaining of the year grading student assignments, participating in ongoing professional development, and preparing the schools for reopening in September 2020. Senior schools will also host orientation sessions for incoming S1 students before the end of June. The Department of Education is now finalizing plans for summer course offerings for our S1, S2, S3, and S4 students. These plans include confirming the total number of students and courses required to launch an online learning service so that the students will be able to make up and earn credits towards their Bermuda school diploma. Both senior schools will be holding graduation activities in celebration of the achievements of the 2020 year graduates. Information about the celebration activities will be communicated directly to parents. All graduation activities will follow safety and health protocols as stipulated by the Department of Health and the Ministry of National Security. Our child support programs. The Department of Education is currently running an educational support program at Cedar Bridge Academy for children whose parents who have returned to work during phase 2. This program will now be expanded for children of those parents who must return to work during phase 3. The expanded program at Cedar Bridge Academy will start Tuesday, June 16th, as June 15th is a public holiday, and end on Friday, June 19th, the last day of school for students. We urge that only those parents returning to work during phase 3 who are interested and who have absolutely no home support at all for their children to attend the educational support program. We ask them to contact their children's school principals no later than Tuesday, June 9th. This will provide in advance the number and year levels of students who will require education support and will assist officers who are running the operation of the education support program to plan effectively. September 2020, the new school year. I want to briefly inform our stakeholders that during the last 2 months, the Department of Education has been engaged in intensive preparation developing safety and health protocols for schools. This has been in collaboration with the Department of Health. These protocols have also had input from school staff and union stakeholders. Once finalized, the department will share the protocols, particularly with our parents, so they are aware of the safety and health measures that will be implemented during the upcoming school year. The Commissioner of Education will be writing directly to parents regarding this. Summer day camps. With school closing on Friday, June 19th, for our students, the Department of Education has been in discussions with the Department of Youth and Sport about the need to commence annual summer day camp program earlier than usual this year. We are thankful that the team from the Department of Youth and Sport for their collaboration, and we are pleased to say in support they will start the annual summer day camps earlier on Wednesday, June 24th, 2020. Private schools. At this point, I want to shift to private schools briefly. As the minister with responsibility for education in Bermuda, during the past month, I've had a number of meetings with the leaders of our private schools. However, as we enter towards phase 3 of Bermuda reopening, each of the private schools will decide independently how they will plan to move forward with their school operations. Nonetheless, the private schools are following the safe and healthy protocols as per the Ministry of Health. And I'm pleased to report that just as the Department of Health undertook a check of our public school entry and exit protocols over a week ago, the officer is currently undertaking walkthroughs with each of the private schools to ensure that safety and health protocols in their school buildings have been fully implemented and compliant with the Ministry of Health safety and health protocols. I thank our private school leaders for the meetings and discussions we've had about the impact of COVID-19 and sharing their experiences and a number of other school-related matters. In closing, I'd like to thank all of our Department of Education and school staff for their continued commitment to our students. I'm grateful to our students and guardians for their support in ensuring our students are engaged in the remote learning activities. I want to also acknowledge our union stakeholders who, through meetings and subsequent and recommendations for enhancing our safety and health strategy for school reopening. This collaborative approach has proven to be very meaningful and reassuring as we force ahead towards school transformation. COVID-19 has presented us with challenges that none of us would have imagined a year ago. Without the collective efforts that I have mentioned above, as well as others that I have mentioned previously, our children would not have fared as well as they have during this time. I would like to thank the Bermuda National Museum, who provided extensive support for our schools. I would also like at this time to recognize Planet Meth and Connect Tech for the invaluable amount of donated hours of service to the Bermuda Public School System students. They have readily volunteered without prompting and provided our students with hundreds of hours of free access to mathematics and coding lessons between them. It is partnerships like these and many others COVID-19 has allowed to form that will no doubt help carry the reforming of our public school system into the future. As always, we continue to encourage our educational family to use the BPSS family feedback form to send your questions, concerns, complaints, and kudos about the work taking place in our schools and at the Department of Education. Thank you, Premier.
Thank you, Minister of Education. Against the backdrop of relatively low numbers of confirmed COVID-19 cases in Bermuda, we will continue to exercise all of the appropriate public health measures needed to keep us healthy. However, we must press forward with the safe reopening of our economy. The Cabinet Committee, led by Minister David Birch, met today and will meet again tomorrow. That committee, however, has confirmed a recommended start to phase 3 for next week, Thursday, June 11th. During Monday's press conference, we will provide full details of what will be open during phase 3. However, it is important to remember that our initial plan had phase 3, including the reopening of churches, gyms, schools, the resumption of full public transportation, the opening of government offices, and the ending of mandatory work from home. However, it is important to note that if circumstances allow you to continue to work from home, this is still being encouraged. The final configurations for phase 3 will be announced for Monday, but the government is on track to move to phase 3 on Thursday, June 11th. I am fully committed to reopening this economy so that we can get our country on the road to economic health. And I look forward to pressing ahead to phase 4 as quickly and as safely as possible. But that means we all have to keep wearing our masks. The global demonstrations and demands for justice in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, together with abject racism and inequality, are also being seen here in Bermuda. The protests taking place outside the U.S. Consul General's offices and those planned for the coming days are opportunities for people to stand together so their voices can be heard. These peaceful demonstrations should not be frustrated by those necessary precautions that we have taken as part of our pandemic response. To ensure that the weekend's planned march can be done safely and in accordance with the law, which currently bans outside gatherings of persons more than 10. I have invited the governor to approve an amendment to the existing regulations to allow the Minister of National Security to set out the appropriate conditions under which a march can take place. These amendments are now with the governor for his review, and I will provide further details as part of a ministerial statement to the House of Assembly tomorrow. Yesterday, the Attorney General, the Honorable Kathy Lynn Simmons, launched the start of a public consultation on a draft regulated cannabis regime for Bermuda. The draft bill envisions licenses for cultivation by commercial growers, cannabis retail shops, the manufacture, research, transportation, import, and export of cannabis and cannabis products. The regulatory requirements for each category of license is provided within the draft legislation, including specific regulations that will apply to cannabis retail shops. I encourage every person in Bermuda who has an interest in providing feedback, whether positive or negative, to the policy document to visit forum.gov.bm and to add your comments. We want to hear from you, and we want to know your thoughts on this draft policy. The consultation will end on the 3rd of July. Also, as a reminder, this Saturday evening on CITV and on Facebook, the Attorney General will be hosting an online town hall so she can discuss this and other matters which are taking place inside of the Ministry of Legal Affairs. And you should visit the Government of Bermuda's social media properties to find out more information and also to submit any questions of which you may have. I would like to thank the Attorney General and her team in Chambers for their hard work, not just for this piece of draft legislation and the comprehensive policy that they have created, but for their hard work in the past few months as they have drafted laws and regulations around COVID-19. Tomorrow, we'll see a busy session in the House of Assembly. 2 bills will be considered that form part of improving the legislative tools available to the government to manage future events like this pandemic without resorting to a state of emergency. In addition to that, I will invite the House to approve the resolution that will reduce the salary of ministers and officers of the legislature, ministers by 15% and members and officers of the legislature by 12.5% for 1 calendar year. Please tune in via parliament.bm, 105.1, or burnews.com to listen. I continue to be cautiously optimistic about our progress. There is more and more economic activity happening in Bermuda, and with our move to phase 3 scheduled for next week, we are one step closer to our new normal. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions from members of the media.
Good evening. My first question, Premier, for you. Premier, the media is usually invited to swearing-in ceremonies of new ministers. Why weren't we, the media, invited today?
Persons inside of a closed space in Government House, and Government House wanted there to be no more than 10 persons in the room, and we managed to keep the 10 persons in the room. I think the governor wanted to make sure he followed his own regulations, so that's the prescribed reason for that. But you're welcome to ask any questions which you may have right now, Trevor.
My next question goes to you again, Premier. It was only a week ago that Minister Keynes, then in charge of immigration, boldly stated that big changes were in the works. And he really put the employers and expatriates on notice. Does this still hold true?
The government is continuous. The policies of any individual minister or the cabinet, we practice collective responsibility. The policies of the government will continue, and ministers speak with the authority of the cabinet. So it will continue.
Employers obviously cannot expect business as usual in the wake of this pandemic, but it's almost but it is almost sounds like the much talked about process or Bermudianization is now in high gear. Is this the case?
I'm not entirely certain how you are looking to answer or what answer you're seeking for that question. The one thing I can say is, as I stated inside of my remarks, I think that it is you have a look and you get to see how government works. You get to see what works well. You get to see what can be improved. And that is the responsibility that I hold as Premier of the country to configure the cabinet. It is my view that it made sense for specifically the work permit section of the Ministry of the Department of Immigration to be combined with the Department of Workforce Development, and also recognizing that financial assistance will most likely have a greater load, more able-bodied person, and the need to have all of those persons who are looking to return back to work to be inside of the same ministry to ensure that there are synergies and to ensure that there's no particular silos which may or may not be created. I think it will work well for the country, but the fact is that Bermudianization has been happening since we've begun our term in office. Bermudianization happens by making sure that you provide free college education and free training to Bermudians who are able to take up jobs and positions inside their economy, which nation is about making sure that you increase the amount of training that exists inside the country and make sure that you transition persons through jobs. The Minister of National Security did an excellent job with immigration and immigration reform. But I also have to recognize that my ministers are worked very hard. And as much as I've known Wayne for most of my life, it's a lot of work. And the fact is that we need to make sure that we reconfigure these particular items and give the focus which is necessary. So I don't accept the premise of your question that this hasn't been happening all the time. But I think what is important is that we look to configure the government to make sure that we are the most effective at this time. And in my view, the most effective need in policy is to make sure that departments of financial assistance, the Department of Workforce Development, and especially the work permit section of the Department of Immigration are in one particular place. And if I may say something as well, it also speaks to the ethos of which I'd laid out when I had my conversation with the delegates of the Progressive Labor Party in my address in October. We have to think of immigration in a different way. And immigration is being broken up into a number of various parts. But we have to recognize that work permits is a regulation of labor matter. And I think it fits very well with the labor ministry.
Does the change in immigration responsibilities reflect specifically the organized labor background of Minister Hayward?
No.
Not at all. Okay, my next question I think goes, Minister, I'll go to Minister King. Minister Keynes, at the Bermuda Royal Regiment, there are specific officers. At the Bermuda Royal Regiment, there are a number of guest workers volunteering at the regiment, specifically 2 from the Dominican Republic and 6-7 Jamaicans. What is the policy regarding guest workers to volunteer at the Bermuda Regiment?
The premise of your question is very interesting. The Bermuda Regiment has a recruitment process. The recruitment process is open to all. We have been struggling to get Bermudians to join the Bermuda Regiment. Whilst the numbers have not been large, I think I don't know where the questioning is going, but we would love to have able-bodied Bermudians, both men and women, join the ranks of the Bermuda Regiment. And the regiment is open, has done campaigns, it's done PR campaigns. The regiment does have spouses of Bermudians. It does have people on work permits in the Bermuda Regiment. This is a part-time battalion that is has a recruitment process, has like any other part, it is open to anyone that is working in Bermuda, spouses of Bermudians as well.
My last question. You are aware of police officers being arrested last week on sexual assault charges?
They were not arrested last week. They were charged last week, sir.
Charged, okay, but charged last week. But it's understood that an individual, the Professional Standards Department lady that runs out, that takes complaints against police officers, also has a complaint against her. Should she be above reproach? And should she herself be warranted to an investigation? It is seen that this matter is being brushed aside. Are you aware of these matters?
Trevor, let me say this, that if you have an internal matters, there are internal procedures, and the Bermuda Police Service has internal procedures for dealing with grievances. If there is a grievance, a person has to put in formally this grievance, and that process has to run its course. No matter who it is in the Bermuda Police Service, no one is above the law. If a person has a complaint, they lodge the complaint, and it goes through the process.
Good evening, Don Burgess, Bermuda Broadcasting. What types of additional caveats might there be in phase 3? Will private schools be able to open if they so choose to do so? And what other caveats might there be for phase 3?
As I mentioned in my statement, as long as they adhere to the guidelines stipulated by the Department of Health.
And I also think it is actually pointless for us to discuss the other caveats that are coming out in phase 3. We've been very disciplined and prescriptive. At the appropriate time, we come to this room, we run through everything that we've discussed, line by line, precept upon precept. The Premier gave a preview as to where we're going to get people ready and prepared for the next phase. And at the appropriate time, we will come and give you everything that your heart desires.
All right, thank you very much. As we move to phase 3 next week, hopefully phase 4 is shortly behind. Mr. Premier, on Monday, you said you don't want to write off this year's tourism season. What might such plans look like for visitors? i.e., will they have to be tested upon arrival at the airport? Will they have to have a tracking app on the phones? Will they be quarantined during their stay? Or might they have like a COVID passport like Jamaica and St. Lucia have put in place where they have to be tested within 72 or 48 hours of arrival? How does government plan on keeping Bermudians safe during this time?
That was a whole lot of questions in one.
Well, I was just trying to throw examples in there
I got you.
as
No
what other
problem.
countries are doing.
No problem. Here's what I'm going to say. I don't believe that those things have been finalized, and we are moving to phase 3 next week, and we're moving to phase 4. I do know that, for instance, the Minister of Health has spoken about the Airbridge flight that's coming in tomorrow, where we're piloting the testing on arrival. There are other views regarding other types of testing modalities that may be used in concert with other things. And that was actually subject of the the Premier's Health Advisory Panel, which met about 3 p.m. earlier today to discuss that particular issue. Those matters have not been finalized, but those matters are going to be expected to be finalized next week, so that as we set ourselves on a path to move to phase 4, coming out or starting phase 3, we can put enough notice out to airlines and persons and travelers, etc. It is not realistic for us to expect to have a successful tourism season if we're going to ask people to quarantine on their property for 14 days and not go anywhere. It is unrealistic. And what we have to make sure is that we are going to be able to use the combination of technology, such as you mentioned with tracking apps, the combination of testing and others to make sure that we can keep the country safe. I think that we have demonstrated very well that we have the ability to do that. I think that the combination of the government's scientific advisors, the person at the hospital, the persons inside of the Ministry of Health, and others will come up with something that works. The Ministry of Tourism and Transport, along with the Bermuda Tourism Authority, have a number of things which they're going back and forth with the Ministry of Health on. But the government of Bermuda does not have the money to make sure that or the ability and capacity to borrow throughout an entire year and to write off a tourism season. There are examples of other countries that have been able to do this successfully. We are certainly in a better and stronger positions than many of those countries with the amount of testing that we have the capacity to do. That the fact that we are even looking to bring on more testing modalities in the very near future, such as saliva tests, which may make it easier to actually capture these particular things. So we are going to make sure we go through that entire process. But it is not going to be realistic for us to have a tourism season and tell persons if you come here that you're going to have to stay in your room for 14 days. So we are pushing that process forward. And I think, as the Minister of National Security had indicated, it'll be very difficult for me to make policy in a press conference. But we have to balance this. Bermuda did not experience an epidemic. We didn't experience community transmission. There are other places that did not either. And we have to consider how we're going to go about that and how we're going to make sure to keep the country safe. But where we are right now, we have to make sure that we open up safely and get more money into our country so we can have economic health as well as personal health.
Just continuing on the tourism theme, the annual Bermuda Triple Crown Billfish Championship is still on schedule for the end of the month, first part of July. Usually fishing boats start arriving mid-June for the end of June when the tournaments start. According to their websites, all is still a go. How can that still be when the boats and the crews won't be quarantined, come ashore for provisions, etc., and owners fly in and out to fish?
There's a few false premises inside of your question.
Okay.
We must recognize that there are a number of boats that have arrived in Bermuda, and they are subject to the same quarantine procedures as in other places, and people are able to bring provisions directly to those particular boats. However, we are aware of the Billfish tournament, and we would like to see it happen in Bermuda, subject to the proper health protocols. While it is difficult to look ahead and to know 4 weeks' time, you can appreciate that the island has moved to the self-quarantine and away from government quarantine facilities. As I said, yachts have been arriving in Bermuda and crews have been undergoing quarantine, and yacht services business have worked with the crews to ensure delivery of provisions as are needed. So we are happy to see the tournament in Bermuda, provided that the health protocols have been met. And I know that the Ministry of Tourism is working with the Ministry of Health in order to facilitate that. But it ties into your earlier question, Don. We cannot keep the country shut down forever, and we must find ways we can balance the safety with making sure that we can have economic activity and dollars into our shores. And that particular tournament provides millions of dollars to our economy on an annual basis. And I think that's certainly something that is wanted and warranted.
Okay, thank you. The public can now shop at many retailers on any given weekday, but restrictions are still in place for grocery stores. Why is the system still in place, and when might government consider relaxing the name day shopping requirements at grocery stores?
Oh, either one.
Thank you, John, for that question. That's a very good question. People have asked that often. The rationale behind that still relates specifically to our desire to try to, as best as possible, contain COVID. In addition to the wearing of the mask and the physical distancing, likewise, when we're going into a grocery store, we want to try to encourage persons to go to the grocery store perhaps once a week or twice a week, do their bulk shopping, so that it eliminates the necessity for them to go back and forth to the grocery store, which of course increases the prospects of them intermingling with persons outside of their household. You have to eat, but with respect, you don't need to necessarily go to a retail store and buy a pair of shoes every day. So there's quite a difference insofar as what is essential and what's more desired.
So just to clarify, people would tend to go to the grocery store more during the week then, rather than the 2 days that they're assigned.
I'm sorry, pardon me?
Sorry, the part of the rationale then would be that if it was opened up to every day, instead of going on maybe twice a week, they might go 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, you might get your bread one day, go get your eggs the next day, et cetera. When we're trying to encourage people to do bulk shopping for the week.
Okay, thank you.
Don, I'm not, and this is just for the camera audience, I'm not purposely clueless this evening, but as you will note, that I am no longer in this committee that's deciding all of these things. So I appreciate there's a little bit of looking, because I don't exactly know. I wasn't appraised the meetings which were happening today. So I'm pleased that the ministers are certainly doing this, and I'm excited. I literally, I'm coming to this press conference finding out information, so this is good.
Okay, good. And my last question for tonight. The health department has been tracking all of Bermuda's 141 positive COVID-19 cases. Health Minister, can you tell us how many of the 141 cases were asymptomatic throughout their COVID-19 infection?
Thank you, John, for that question. Approximately 43% of the cases are currently classified as asymptomatic. However, that data regarding that particular there's a qualifier insofar as some individuals present different symptoms. So, for example, seniors don't necessarily present the same type of symptoms because of their own comorbidities. But at this point, we can say 43%, but there is that qualifier.
All right, thank you very much.
Mhm.
Good evening, everyone. Owen Johnson Barnes, Rural Gazette. Ms. Wilson, we've seen some fairly low testing numbers in the last few days, 30 yesterday, around the same today. Can you tell us why we're going from having 200 results to having 30?
That is a good question. It is a rather unfortunate phenomenon. We have a very, very strategic and aggressive testing regime that has been happening heretofore. We are actually reformulating it as we speak. And starting next week, and I think I might have mentioned it earlier, maybe on Monday, we're going to do far more aggressive testing, and we're combining all of our testing resources. So in addition to persons utilizing the Southside facility, which again, we're encouraging persons to go down there, make an appointment, particularly if you're in the professional services businesses like barbers, beauticians, etc. And then also we're going to roll out our Taking It to the Streets initiatives. You may remember we've had those where we'll do blood pressure screening, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's going to be rolled out starting next week as well. So you'll see us at Marketplace and at some of the schools and at the fire department. So there'll be various stops every single day of the week. It'll be advertised, of course, where we will encourage persons to come and just walk right in and get your testing. So you can do it a number of ways. You can continue to take advantage of signing up online to do it at MDL at Southside, or alternatively, you'll be able to take it through the streets Taking It Through the Streets initiatives, which will begin next week.
All right. Now, you said earlier today that we've had 84 cases in which you've been able to successfully track down the source of local transmission. I was wondering, in how many of those cases was that local transmission at the hospital?
I may have to get that number for you. I do have it, but it's going to take me a moment to actually count up the number and research it. So can I just shoot you an email and give you that?
Sure, that can work for me. We've also heard reports from people who have received the antibody testing at locations other than Southside, and then have been told that they a blockade that would prevent people from getting the results of their antibody tests.
I can't quite answer that insofar as if you're saying that they're not getting their results. I do understand that you're saying outside of Southside?
Yes, people who've been referred by their doctors who have received the antibody test, but then have not been given an answer as to what the results were.
Well, the Ministry of Health does receive the antibody tests through the MDL previously. However, I understand that there may have been one other office that was collecting antibody tests and performing it themselves, but that was a matter that's been referred to and is being looked at by the Health Council.
All right. Mr. Premier, there has obviously been the cabinet shuffle. Now, some people might question the decision to have the cabinet shuffle in the midst of this pandemic. Why did you choose to change the leadership of some of these ministries at this particular time?
Well, I appreciate the question. There hasn't been great change in the leadership of ministries. As you see, there's only slight adjustments in moving of a number of departments and portfolios. But I think that that's a reflection on how well the cabinet has performed during this particular crisis. I mean, it came at us very quickly, and all the ministers, supported by a very able caucus, and backbenchers and senators assisting with policy development and making sure that we continue to make policies and meet the needs of the people of whom we serve. So I think that though that some persons may have wanted a bigger shift, other persons may have said, why shift at all? I have to look at what we have, understand the challenges of which we face, and say what are the changes which can be best made to ensure that the government can continue to perform at a high level. So this change is not a very major shift. A lot of departments have been moved to various ministers, but by and large, the titles have mostly remained the same. And outside of a new minister coming in to the cabinet, there has not been that, I would say, that significant change which has taken place during this time.
Now, one of the changes was the move of the Casino Gaming Commission to your particular remit. we've not heard much from the commission in recent years. Can you tell us what your vision for it is at this stage?
My vision is to get casino gaming up and running as quickly as possible. But I think when you say that you haven't heard much from the commission, it was with the Minister of Finance. The reason why I put it to the Ministry of Finance in 2018, when the Minister of Finance became the Minister of Finance, was very specifically because the main issue with casino gaming in Bermuda is not our reticence against casino gaming. It is the issue of solving the banking problem with casino gaming and the fact that local banks would not. The Minister of Finance in our meeting yesterday has assured me that they have made significant progress on those particular issues. I believe they've resolved to go forward with a cashless model, and I think that the banks are comfortable around the compliance issues that surround that. So my view is to remove some of the load from the Minister of Finance, who is certainly dealing with a number of matters, particularly right now that the banking challenges have by and large been sorted or ironed out. I think that it fits pretty well with my remit as the minister responsible for economic development in Bermuda. And I think that on that particular measure, it is to move forward, make sure any outstanding issues are completed so we can move the regulations forward and have casinos open in Bermuda. There are a number of group of persons. I think from even our national hero, the living national hero, Sir John Swan, has put forward various ideas for casino gaming, which I know have been put forward to the Economic Advisory Council and that I've also looked at. But the fact is that we know that there are provisional licenses which exist. We know that there's things that have to be moved forward in advance in that. And now that we have the banking problem largely sewn up, I think we can move forward to advancing it. So no particular reason, except for I think it fits well with economic development, and the Minister of Finance is quite busy. So it's good to try to lift something off of his particular remit.
Now, of course, while Bermuda is doing fairly well in handling this COVID crisis and looks to be hopefully moving toward the phases very soon, obviously our neighboring jurisdictions have not all been as lucky. Are you concerned, this is on the tourism side of things, that we might have a cut match this year with only residents?
I will say this, the Minister of National Security, who has responsibility for large events and other things, can better comment on what cut match may or may not look like. But I can't necessarily say that I'm concerned. As the answer that I gave to Don, I think that it is very, very important. And I think that this government and this country and all of the private sector entities that will work towards this are good enough. And we have demonstrated the fact that we can make these decisions and we can make sure that we keep the country safe while making sure that we advance the real needs of people in this country to be able to work and to provide for their families in a safe fashion. So I don't know what the future will look like, but I am relatively resolute that by July, we should have commercial air traffic coming into Bermuda. And I want to make sure that people who are involved in the tourism industry can safely exist in that. And there's been an incredible amount of work by a number of partners getting us there. And so whether it's cut match, whether it's after, whether it's Labor Day, whether it's round the island, whether it's county game, whether it's lots of different things which may or may not happen, what I want to make sure is that we have tourists that are able to come to our island this summer. There are persons who are looking to book to come to Bermuda. There are hoteliers that are asking for clarity on these particular issues because they have seen challenges with our existing provision of required 14-day quarantine, where competing jurisdictions, such as Jamaica even, is not even testing persons upon arrival. So you have to make sure we balance this. But I think, and I have complete confidence that between the Ministry of Health, and between the Ministry of Tourism and Transport and the Cabinet Committee, which contains the two ministers to my left, we'll get it right.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Maya Palacio here for Media Maya. My first question goes to Minister Wilson. How concerning, if any, is it that the number of persons that are getting tested is decreasing as the island continues to open up?
Thank you for that question, Maya, but it's not concerning at all. I think that what is exciting is the fact that we've tested such a large percentage of our population already, and that we're continuing with that aggressive regime. As I indicated to Don, next week, starting next week, you'll see more pop-up testing at marketplace and at schools and at different locations throughout the island, and we're going to continue to encourage persons to get tested. But the fact remains is that we have tested a large percentage of our population, and we will continue to do that.
Thank you. And that actually leads me to my next question from a community member asking if persons who have recently been tested positive will they be getting retested again after 2 weeks?
Yes, if they wish to get retested, and we're encouraging them to do so. Now, if they've recently tested positive, then they will be required to get retested.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And my next question, I believe, will go to you, Honorable Premier. In what phase will the unemployment benefit stop?
The unemployment benefit doesn't stop at a particular phase. The unemployment benefit is rolling. The maximum unemployment benefit is for 12 weeks. So it will begin to wind down for certain persons in a couple of weeks. The Minister of Finance, I think, has been very clear that he's going to assess that. I'm certain that he'll work with the new Minister of Labor to understand precisely the requirements, as the new Minister of Labor will have responsibility for financial assistance. And I think that we'll be able to make firm announcements on the future of that, if not next week, then the week following. But what I will tell you is that the country's I think we've demonstrated very clearly, we're not going to let our people go hungry. And I'm not going to be the premier of the country that is going to have our island shut down while people have the ability to eat. And we're not going to find ourselves in that particularly desperate position. It is not something that I'm prepared to countenance as leader of this country.
Thank you very much. And my next question will probably be answered for Monday, but I'm going to try anyway. A lot of persons are asking about curfew. So can we expect curfew to be lifted during phase 3?
I'm happy to answer that question. I do not believe that we can expect curfew to be lifted in phase 3. There may be adjustments to the time, but the fact is that we are still within a state of emergency inside of this country. And coronavirus can continue to flare up, or can flare up at the tweets and the retweets and all the rest and the begging and everything else. The fact is that we are still in a serious situation, and we are not out of the woods yet, though we are certainly encouraged of where we stand. I do not think that it is realistic that the curfew is going to be lifted until we are out of a state of emergency. And even then, it may be necessary to continue it.
Thank you very much. And my final question, which probably would have been for the Minister of Finance, but how many persons have taken on the opportunity to take money out of their private pension?
We do not know that yet, but what I can say is that I know that the Minister of Finance, through his particular ministry, will be organizing I think, an education campaign regarding financial literacy, regarding what persons should know about the withdrawing of their funds, what is the best way to use and to invest it, when you should, when you shouldn't. And I believe that is going to be taking place next week, but I don't believe they would have had those figures yet. I know that the legislation only went into effect on Monday, and I'm certain that we'll probably get those figures in about after a month, giving it some time to see how many persons had taken advantage of it. Because remember, it doesn't come directly to the Minister of Finance. It comes to the individual pension fund managers. So when it goes to the pension fund managers, and those persons will have to make reports to the Pension Commission. And I think at that point in time, we'll get stats. So I don't believe that you'll get any usable stats until the end of June. But at that point in time, we'll be happy to make sure we share that information.
Thank you very much.
No problem. There are no more questions. Okay, so with that, I want to thank everyone for their time and attention. A reminder, the House of Assembly will be meeting tomorrow, and you can tune in on parliament.pm 105.1 or on burnnews.com to listen to the latest. There will be a number of ministerial statements, and as I said, a discussion and debate on a number of particular bills. Over this particular weekend, as has been said, demonstrations which will take place inside of the country. The Minister of National Security will be laying out the specific requirements underneath the revised laws, but I want to echo the comments of the Minister of Health that it is particularly important that if any person wishes to join in this peaceful demonstration, which is our right. We are going to change the law and make prescriptions to make sure that it is legal and lawful underneath this current state of emergency. But it is critically and vitally important, no matter how hot, cold, or otherwise, that we wear a mask, as there will be a large amount of persons inside of a space, and we cannot afford for us to have a super spreading event. So for those of us who are going to participate, let us make sure that we are following the health guidelines. So with that, I wish everyone a wonderful evening, a good weekend. Look forward to seeing you again here on Monday. And I would like to say to everyone, thank you and good evening, Bermuda.